Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. It's the start of a whole new year, and it truly feels like a dream that so much has happened. However, some dreams are nightmares in disguise. So, don't get ready for your 40 winks just yet. Grab some coffee and settle in by your monitor screens for Dreamscape Part 2, The Forbidden Book.
I had found an old book, laying within a fireplace, bricked up and hidden from the world for generations. The book was bound in dark, brown-colored leathers, some lighter than others, and together they made a disturbing patchwork that formed the exterior of the wretched book. My uncle stood beside me and stared at the book with a look of what could only be described as bewildered fear. I gripped the edge of the book's cover with my trembling fingers, and I opened the book, gazing into its pages. The book's pages, yellowed with age, contained images of animals, both known and unknown. There were images of normal animals, such as deer and horses, but there were also disgusting and twisted-looking creatures. There were images of large beasts devouring children. There were illustrations of beings that appeared to be fish people, human bodies with gills and fins, and scales for skin. I flipped through the book's pages, seeing unknown words written in some foreign, hieroglyphic-like language. I seen more images of beings that should not and could not be. It was at the point about halfway through the book when I had seen them. The creatures that I had seen the night before I had found this book. The twisted shadow things. The nightmares that should not have been. Upon this book, I noticed a dark red spot near the bottom right corner of the page. What is this? I thought. With closer examination, I discovered the truth of what it was. It was blood, and that small spot at the corner of this page was not all of it. I turned the next few pages, and they were all caked in long, dried blood. About 5 or so pages in the middle of the book were covered in a dark red. Someone had lost quite a bit of blood within the pages of this book. So much so, in fact, that the blood had obscured the pages so much that the images could no longer be seen. Only a dark crimson remained. I was hypnotized by the book. It was as if I were drawn into it, pulled into its pages. I was entranced by its grim images. I began to hear my name being called. It was a whisper at first. It sounded far off and in a foreign voice. It slowly got louder, and with each change in pitch, it would also change in tone. The voice changed each time it spoke. It was trying to speak to me, trying desperately to get my attention. I heard my name being called one final time, and I opened my eyes to find my uncle sitting over top of me, shaking me to get me to wake up. "What happened?" I asked. "What do you mean, what happened? Get up, it's time to get to work. The house ain't gonna fix itself," he exclaimed. "What? Come on, we got work to do," he said, before walking out of the room. What happened? Was all that a dream? Did I really find that old book in the fireplace in the wall? What's going on with me? I looked around the room in confusion. I was upstairs in the room where I had slept a few nights before. How did I get here? I asked myself before climbing to my feet and exiting the room. My uncle was there waiting for me at the top of the stairs. Sorry I woke you like that. I was just worried about how much work we have left to do on the house. I was worried you were going to have to go to the hospital or something after how you looked yesterday, and how you went to bed sick. Had all that been a dream? I thought to myself. Was it just a terrible nightmare brought on by a fever? I went to bed sick? I asked, still not remembering the event. Yeah. After you found that book, you turned pale as a ghost and told me you felt sick and that you were going to bed. And before I could argue with you, you ran up the stairs coughing. Hell, after looking at that book, I don't blame you for getting sick. That's some messed up shit. I looked up at my uncle with confusion and fear. What happened? The book was real. It hadn't been a fever-induced nightmare. So, since it wasn't a dream, I had blacked out. I had time unaccounted for. Did I just go to sleep, or had I done something else in that time? I didn't feel rested. I felt like I'd been up all night running a marathon. I was still exhausted. What happened? What did I do? Why did I black out? Where's the book? I looked around for the book and seen it laying upon an old end table left in the living room by the previous owners. I found myself drawn to it again. I walked toward it and grabbed it, picking it up and reached to open it before stopping myself. I dropped the book on the floor and it landed with a loud thud upon the dusty floor. What was happening to me? Why am I so drawn to this book that I can barely control myself around it? I looked down onto the book and noticed that it had fallen open upon the floor. It had opened to the page with a large blood spot at the bottom right corner, but the blood spot was no longer there. I was confused and panicked about this. Where did it go? I found myself deeply concerned about the book's change. I quickly snatched up the book and flipped through the pages. The blood was gone. All of it. The pages were cleaner and looked newer, too. They were formerly closer to yellow, but now they were almost white. The leather it was bound in looked newer, too, lighter and less cracked. It now felt less like leather and more like skin. I was now even more terrified by this book. It was as if the book was feeding upon my soul, draining my life energy to revitalize itself. I found myself curious as to what was on the pages that were previously obscured by the dark crimson of the blood that had stained them the night before. I flipped the pages back to the page I used as a marker for where they were, the page that formerly had the large spot on it. I turned the pages and seen unknown hieroglyphic languages. None of it looked recognizable as any language I had ever seen in any book or documentary. I turned the pages and saw more images of those wretched things. In the pictures, they were painted, attached to the heads of children, asleep in their beds, drawing out their fears, feeding upon their terror. Were these beings the source of nightmares? These images, to me, appeared to depict that. I flipped the page one last time, to the last page that had been obscured, and that is where I saw him for the first time. There on that page was a monster. He was large and consisted of a body that was riddled with wounds and pus-filled sores. Scattered about his body were dozens of arms, legs, wings, mouths, and eyes. He appeared to have hundreds of appendages and orifices without purpose. The head that sat atop what appeared to be his shoulders was not really a head at all. It was an ocean invertebrate, like a squid, but it had cat-like eyes, yellow with diamond-shaped pupils. He was chained to a large black stone, and a fire blazing red raged around he and the stone. He was a prisoner, a wretched thing. What sin had he committed to be condemned to this fate? Then I began to hear a whispering coming from the book before me. Whispering coming from that twisted thing, that thing in the book. The whispering was quiet at first, but then it grew louder, still muffled. I could not understand what the beast was telling me. It grew louder and louder still. Soon, the beast was screaming at me. It screeched and howled. It spoke in gurgled tongues. Its language made no sense. Yet, I knew what it wanted. It wanted freedom. It wanted to be free from the boulder to which it was chained. It wanted to be away from those ever-burning fires that surrounded it, burning its skin. I seen through the book and visualized the creature staring back at me, pain within his eyes. He looked into my eyes, into my soul, into my very being. He begged me for freedom. He cried tears of blood and pleaded with me. I felt an uneasiness with him, but I also felt sadness about him. I then became aware that I had again become entranced by the book. So, as if to save myself, I drew the strength to slam the book shut. The book closed with a loud clap, and all was silent in the house. I was no longer in the living room. Again, I was upstairs in that room in which I continued to return to. There was no longer daylight outside. The house was black, and I could barely see enough to tell what room I was in. I could hear my uncle snoring, his snores reverberating through the house, all the way from the living room downstairs. What time was it? How long had I been staring at that book? Why do I keep blacking out? How did I get here? I don't know. I looked at the book again, and just as I feared, the book had again changed. Again, it had revitalized itself. The patches that were stitched together could now be clearly seen as skin. Human skin. Not just skin from one race or another, but skin from many races. The skin was warm. It had a moisture to it, as if it were sweating. This book was alive. Oh God, this book was really feeding upon me. I dropped the book in a panic, feeling dizzy. I sat there for a moment, nearly unable to keep myself from passing out. There was little I could do. My heart was racing, but I was exhausted. I just sat there for a moment upon the floor, then slowly lowered myself down. I laid there for what felt like ages, but was probably just minutes, just staring at the ceiling, scanning across the hollowed-out walls of the room, fighting myself to stay awake. But I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I was terrified. I was losing it. I couldn't understand what was happening to me. Why was I drawn to this book? Why am I so exhausted? Why? Soon, I felt myself drift off to sleep without any resistance, slipping into a sweet unconsciousness, falling into the dream world, falling into the dreamscape, falling.
Well, it looks like heading off to sleep is a bad idea. I guess it's time to stock up on coffee and energy drinks. But if you're still awake next weekend, make sure to stop by for another dreadfully good time. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.